You are now listening to Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet, a true crime podcast where cozy meets criminal, hosted by Jasmine C.L. Prince. Grab your yarn, pour up an iced coffee, let's sit through the chaos.
Hey BC3 crew, welcome back to Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet, the podcast where we sip iced coffee or iced drinks, work on a project, and unpack crimes that feel way too real than we would like to admit. As always, I'm your host, Jasmine, and welcome to the BC3 crew. If this is your first time, to my OGs, welcome back. I'm so appreciative of y'all. Okay, so today we are closing out our credit and identity series, our New Year's Same Scams series with the case that I researched last year. So listen, y'all know I'm coming up on a year of the show, and when I was planning out episodes to do, I actually wanted to cover this one first, but during research, I felt like I wasn't ready yet to cover it properly, so I put it off. Then we got to August, and I saw that the person had gotten released from prison. So I was like, oh, I really need to do it now because that's another layer to the story. So when I was planning out what I was going to be doing for this year, and I knew I was going to be covering CPN, credit, tax fraud, all of that, I said this will be a good episode to close out the series on. But then, y'all, my heart dropped last week because a bigger true crime podcast covered the story, and they dropped it to their regular audience yesterday. And I was so devastated because I felt like maybe I shouldn't do it because I didn't want people to accuse me of copying or cheating or anything like that. But shout out to Sisters Who Kill podcast discussing group because I went in there and I expressed my concerns, and they were all very supportive and just told me to just do what I was planning on doing regardless. So I'm doing it. I know they covered it. I would encourage y'all, if you've seen it, to go listen to it. But I'm just going to stick to my plan and cover it as well. So I know y'all probably like, okay, girl, who is it? I am covering Brittish Williams. Y'all may know her from Basketball Wives LA. She was released back in August 2025. So I was like, I have to do it. So Brittish had some federal charges tied to CPN, bank accounts, taxes, pandemic loan programs. Like, she did all of the things. So I knew it was a great way to close out this series. So that is what we're going to do today, how we're going to end it. And I'm very excited to be covering this. So y'all already know how we do. Imagine building a whole brand around being a boss, a businesswoman, and a reality TV personality while secretly running fraud schemes in the background. From credit cards open with fake social security numbers to pandemic loans meant for struggling businesses, Brittish Williams did not just bend the system. She worked it from every angle. And even after the government came knocking, she kept going, y'all. So like I said, this is the story of how a Basketball Wives star turned a gambling addiction, a CPN, and a string of bad decisions into a federal fraud case that landed her in prison. But y'all know how we do, the iced coffee of the episode. Today's drink is called the Safe Space Iced Latte. You're going to need strong brew coffee or cold brew, brown sugar syrup, oat milk, or milk of your choice, cinnamon. And I know y'all keep saying, y'all, you did this one before. It's a classic. It's a classic. So just mix all together, your coffee, your brown sugar, and your milk. Mix that all together first. Pour that over ice. And then sprinkle some cinnamon on the top if you want to. Very classic, very sweet, very simple. That's it. Crochet update. Still working through my husband's sweater. These sleeves are trying to take me out. They're taking forever. I'm trying to figure out if I want to do a different stitch. I don't know, y'all, because I'm getting bored, but I'm trying to stay focused. My ADHD is kicking in with his sweater, and he's, like always, for the almost past year, has been so patient. Y'all send me some good vibes or something, because I'm determined to finish, but I'm also getting bored. So yeah, there we go. Enough of the small talk. Here we go. Before the fraud case and before reality TV, Brittish Williams described her upbringing as stable in ways that shaped how she learned to survive. unstable in ways that shaped how she learned to survive. A lot of my research came from the interview she did with Carlos King, outside of course, court documents and all that. But she sat down with him and did an almost 2-hour interview. So I wanted to really capture her story from her own words. And so we're going to get into a lot of that interview, and I also have clips to play for you all as well. So in that interview with Carlos King, Brittish says she was raised mainly by her father, her grandmother, and her great aunt because her mother just wasn't consistently in her life. She recalled actually having to go to rehab when she was little, around, I think she said 5, to visit her mother just because that's the state that she was in. And she really did not have a consistent motherly presence in her life, and she kind of grew up without that steady maternal guidance that many girls rely on. I remember really relying on my mom, especially at that young age, so I can't imagine coming up and not being able to rely on my mother. In this interview, she gives an example that sounds small, but it really speaks volumes. She says that she didn't learn how to use a tampon until she was 20, not because she was sheltered, but because the women raising her just didn't teach her, and her mother wasn't there. Which that just, it's something so simple that she didn't learn. It speaks volumes to her upbringing. She also talks about abandonment in ways that still affect her as an adult. And she recalled her mom promising to show up for birthdays and then not coming. And she says those moments stayed with her and are things that she was working through in therapy. So here is where we really get to Brittish in how we know her, or how she's portrayed in the media, how we get to know her as an audience. So Brittish says that she was enrolled at St. Louis University and originally planned to pursue anesthesiology. She described shadowing her cousin, who worked as an anesthesiologist, and being serious about that path. Eventually, though, she says that the program just felt overwhelming. She said that she felt like she didn't have a life just because she had to do so much. And so she switched her major from biology to communications and journalism, which I can understand. Anesthesiologist is very serious, so that makes sense. This is where it's really important to make sure that Black people tell Black stories, because we understand the nuances of things that happen in Black households. Not saying that I am making excuses. However, I think when you understand culturally what goes on in Black homes, you understand people's choices a little bit better. So this is something that really shaped Brittish. She says that by her junior year at, where was she at again? St. Louis University. Yeah, by her junior year, she needed loan money again. And when she initially started, her aunt was the one who was helping her get her loans. However, by her junior year, she had gotten so sick that Brittish just felt like she didn't want to ask her to help her because, she had her own stuff going on. So since she didn't have her aunt anymore, she needed somebody else. Well, her mother was not making any money. And for anyone who has completed the loan application, you know that if you use someone who doesn't have any income, that puts your score way better to get more loan money. So she goes to her mom, was like, "Hey mom, I need to use your information for school money." And her mom was like, "Well, no," because she wanted some of the money and Brittish needed it for school. So she says, "Well, no, I'm not going to do it." So she gets with her dad and they're like, "Okay, well, we can just fill it out anyway because all of the forms are online." So technically, she didn't forge her mom's signature, but she did it without her mom's consent. So she gets her loan money. She's in school. Her mom finds out, calls Brittish and says, "So you used my information and you didn't even give me any of the money." Which, no, I'm not giving you any of the money. This is for school. I'm not just spending it. Like, I need it. But her mom, being who she was upset that Brittish did not give her any of that money. So her mother calls the school and says, "Hey, y'all gave her this money using my information. I did not give her permission. So take the money away. And so that's what ended up happening. The school was like, hey, your mom didn't give you permission, so we have to take these loans back. And because of that, she didn't have money to finish school, which as somebody's mother, I don't understand how you can be that diabolical to where if your child doesn't give you money that's for school, you're going to withhold your cooperation. And why I say this is important that Black people tell Black stories, I was a high school advisor for 1 year at an inner city school in Detroit, Michigan. And when I went through explaining the FAFSA, I want to make sure I'm saying that because anytime there's a true crime podcast and people don't pronounce that correctly, people be in the comments. When it was time to explain how that worked, and I'm telling everyone, hey, they are minors, so they cannot apply without their parents' information. There were so many parents like, oh, I don't want to be tied to it. I don't want my information. I don't this, that, and the third. And I'm like, you're not responsible for anything. They're not taking out the parent plus loan. You don't have to do that. The government just needs to see what you make in order to determine what your child qualifies for. But you're not attached to any loans. You're not responsible for anything. You're not on the hook for anything. But so many parents decide that they just don't want they don't want to give their information to the government, and so the child is left stranded because you cannot apply as an independent student until you turn 24. By that point, who's going back to school? Most people they're so used to just working at that point, they're just like, forget it. So this is something that happens a lot in the Black household. Again, not saying that British should have just gone and essentially forged her mother's information. But when you understand those dynamics, you understand a little bit more why she did what she did. She was like, she's not trying to help me. I'm trying to get it how I can. And so this is just what I'm going to do. But after that happened and she couldn't go to school anymore, she's trying to figure out how she's going to pivot, like what's going to happen. And she really didn't know. But not long after that is when she met Lorenzo Gordon, who, eventually became her fiance. She said he was about 22 at the time, and he was an overseas basketball player. So after they had known each other for a while, he says, hey, how about you come with me overseas, and when we come back, I'll pay for you to go to school. So she's like, okay, bet. So she goes with him to Russia, stays over there for 9 months with him while he plays basketball, and then they come back together and he pays for her to go to school. So eventually she does finish in her communications and journalism, but it was because of her mom. Like, she had to meet somebody who had the financial means to support her in the way that her own mother didn't, which is crazy. Again, not condoning what she did, but we have to understand what was happening in order to realize and understand the choices that she made. So when she met Lorenzo, that's how she shifts from, well, not really shifts because she's still in communications and journalism, but that's really how she makes a splash into the media. Also, too, though, I said that she was an entrepreneur. I want to also get into that because that is some fraud that when I was researching this last year, it was a lot to that. So I guess I'll just drop it here. So she had a clothing line that was basically a drop shipping site where, you could purchase things from her and then they would get drop shipped to you and things like that. But she wasn't doing right by her customers. She had so many complaints that the Better Business Bureau ended up giving her an F rating. And there were so many women speaking out saying, do not buy from her. She's a scammer. One lady, she bought something in, I want to say December of 1 year, and she just never heard back from her again. She was ghosted. At one point, she was calling, trying to get updates, and she called back another time, and the line was disconnected. She had tried to buy some boots, I think, for her daughter, and they sent it, but it wasn't what she ordered, and it was a lot going on. And so that was kind of the initial introduction, I guess, into scamming for British, but it was kind of swept under the rug. Nobody really knew about it until she got on Basketball Wives, because once people start seeing her on TV, they were like, hey, that's who still owes me money. And so that's how a lot of times these scammers get caught up. If you kind of just and again, not condoning scamming, but if you just kind of do your scam and fade to the background, that's one thing. But you owe people money, and then you're going to go on national television and not think that people are going to connect the dots and know that that's you and you owe them money. It's just crazy. So she touts herself as being an entrepreneur. However, she was not a good one at all. But let's get into her with Basketball Wives. So when she's with Lorenzo, she says, hey, I think I want to do Basketball Wives. And he's looking at her like they don't have any basketball wives of players who play overseas. She's like, well, I'm going to change that. And she does. She meets with one of the cast members, and they meet, and she thinks she's a great fit. And so they put British in contact with whoever she needs to be in contact with. She does this or several video interviews, and they add her to the cast of Basketball Wives LA. She came on to season 3. So on the show, she was introduced as the fiance of overseas basketball player again, Lorenzo Gordon, and their on-again, off-again relationship, including their engagement and eventual breakup. That was like a large part of the storyline. They also appeared on the reality show Marriage Boot Camp Reality Stars because they had been engaged for 2 years, but had not married. And a large part of that was because British felt like, and this is what she was telling one of the castmates when she initially came on the show, she said she felt like cheating is just something that men do, and as long as I don't find out about it, it's whatever. Well, she started finding out about it. And she didn't just find out about it once. She was finding out about it over and over again. And so now that I know about it, it's an issue, is what she's saying. So they eventually had a daughter together named Dash Dior, who was born in 2018, even though they eventually later separated for good. However, I'm not sure if British was just trying to make a name for herself or what, but during season 3, she went after one of the castmates who had a much bigger following than her, and she kind of went after her and called her out of her name. And people are like, whoa, what's going on? And then she just kind of said some really off-the-wall comments to the point of where the other castmate was like, listen, I'm not shooting with her no more. And she kind of got all the other, or not all of them, she got some of the other castmates to say the same thing to the point of where Basketball Wives had to fire her because she just was causing too much issue. So in the middle of this, she's not, how I'm going to make some money. So at this point, she's saying that this is when she is doing those businesses. I'm sorry, I kind of jumped ahead of myself. So this is where she had the clothing line that just wasn't doing well. And then she also started a hair company, House of Hair, and then had some involvement in a trucking logistics business. Then she also eventually worked as a radio host back in St. Louis. And then even when, later on when she got those fraud charges, the radio station who knew he had been indicted also hired her on the radio show. So she's kind of all over the place, but she's figuring it out. However, in the midst of all of this, she says she just has so much going on that she eventually develops a gambling gambling problem. So much so to where she said at one point she lost $50,000 in a span of 2 days. And she says Lorenzo had retired from playing basketball, so they didn't really have the money, and she's trying to figure out how they're going to maintain their lifestyle. And I think her dad had just gotten sick, and so she was just like, she kind of fell into gambling, and it was just really bad. So she's just kind of all over the place. And it's during her time with Basketball Wives because they eventually do bring her back for season 10. And season 10 is where she actually gets indicted. And so there's a scene in Basketball Wives where the cast are trying to go to their trip to Palm Springs, and they notice that British isn't there. So like, what's going on? What's happening? And they eventually learn that she had gotten indicted. And when I first researched this last year, I saw the Carlos King interview first. And so that shaped my perspective of what was going on. And I was like, okay, well, it seems like she just kind of made some innocent mistakes. I'm not really sure, we should hold her accountable to it. And then I saw her clips of her explaining what was going on Basketball Wives. She was kind of telling her castmates what was happening. And even more so, I'm really feeling for her. I'm like, man, this is a terrible, messed up situation. But then I keep doing research and I'm looking at the comments and people are saying, she lacks accountability. She's crying like she's a victim and she's not the victim. And, it's just, this case made me very torn because I wanted to feel like she honestly made a mistake and she didn't know. She didn't know. But as I was looking into the indictments and everything like that, I'm like, no, you knew. Again, like I understand the thought process, especially when I get into her crimes and then I'm going to play her response to it because when at the point where she's on the interview with Carlos is after she had been indicted. She hadn't turned herself in yet. So it's that in between time of, I know I'm going to prison. I don't think she knew how long she was going to be there yet. And she's like, I'm going to tell my side of the story. But in the midst of all of this, I'm like, I don't really know how I felt about it because I don't want to say she put on a good face, but she really did put on a good face. I might play that clip too of her explaining to her castmates on Basketball Wives of what was going on because she's just in tears, explaining what's going on because she had just gotten out of jail and met them in Palm Springs a couple days later. And she mentions her dad in it. And I'm, again, reading the comments and people are like, how are you crying like you're a victim when you stole people's identities and you stole their money and you're bringing up your dad in the situation? It's just really weird. It's hard. It became harder to feel sorry for her, to feel like she didn't know what was going on when she continually lacked accountability. She continually didn't say, even though I didn't know that was wrong, that was messed up. Eventually she does say, I knew it was wrong and I did it anyways. But in the midst of all this, she just continued to dodge accountability. And that was another reason too why I was not sure how to cover it because I wasn't sure exactly where I stood or how I felt about the situation. So here we go with the details of her frauds because she ended up having a lot of indictments. So here we go with the tax fraud. So the claim was she underreported her income on her 2017, 2018, and 2019 tax returns and falsely claimed a niece and nephew as dependents to inflate deductions. These lies allowed her to evade paying about $29,366 in taxes. She also failed to file tax returns entirely after 2019, notably not filing any returns after her 2021 indictment and even claimed exemption status on her radio jobs tax form so that no taxes were withheld from her pay. Then the misuse of Social Security numbers and identity theft. That was one, but it broke up into a lot of different charges. So the claim is that she obtained and used Social Security numbers that were not hers. She later claimed she had purchased a fraudulent CPN or credit privacy number, credit protection number, whatever you want to call it, from a credit repair lady to open lines of credit and bank accounts. Again, we went through this last week. A CPN in itself is not fraud, but how you use the CPN is how then it turns over into fraud because you are not providing your Social Security number. That is, you're getting loans by this. That's, I think, theft by deception as well. But again, I'm not a credit person, so don't quote me. So using these bogus identities, she opened credit cards and loans in 2017, accruing approximately $28,537 in unpaid bills to victim companies when she didn't pay those debts. She also used the illicit social security numbers to open bank accounts into which she deposited bad checks. She would deposit checks stolen from other people's accounts and quickly withdraw cash before the checks bounced, causing an additional $23,850 in losses to banks. So when I was just looking at that clip on Basketball Wives and her interview with Carlos, I'm like, oh, she didn't know what was going on. But then when I read this indictment, I was like, oh, sis, come on. You are stealing people's money, and you know it's wrong if you close the account before the check can catch it. And so she's describing all of this again in the interview. So let me just let y'all hear it in her own words. And I kind of chopped it up a little bit. I'll probably post a full clip on Instagram, but I just want to play a little bit of it for you right here.
One insurance lady, like, hey, I want to get some kind of, like, I didn't have the credit. I was like 25 or 26. I remember meeting somebody who did credit, and she was like, oh, I can get you instant credit. She was like, you can just get a CPN. It's like they give you a social security number, and then you build the social security number up. So when people see this misuse of a social security number, they think I went and stole people's social security numbers or something. That wasn't the case. I bought a CPN from a credit lady, and I don't know if it was somebody's actual social security number or if it was something they created. I don't know, but that's where that came from.
There's people out there that will sell you social security numbers, whether it's fake or it could be from a person who's alive or a person who's dead.
Well, see, I didn't even know all those things then.
You know,
I just thought it was like, hey, they create a number, and then now you build your credit up, and you will be able to have good credit to go get things with.
From a different social security number that isn't your own.
Correct. Yeah. So that's how that occurred. And each of those felony charges is everyone. It's like people think I have 15 felonies. What she did was I had CPN. If I went to U.S. Bank and I got a $500 credit card, that's a charge. That's a count. If I went to Navy Federal and got a $1,000 loan, that's a count. She made each thing a count, even though I don't know if it was to make the amount to add up, because off the CPN I think I got $12,000.
Did you know it was illegal when we were doing it?
No, I did not. Her insurance money.
Okay, and before that, she's talking about the bad checks. She's like, the same credit person was like, oh, I can get you to like make some money off of these checks. All you have to do is get these checks, deposit them into the account. And she's like, oh, well, how do you do that? And it's crazy for her to think that was legal. When they're explaining it to you, there's no way that in your right mind you can think that was legal. And I can understand how she didn't know the CPN was illegal. I can see that. But the depositing checks part, you knew that was illegal. But then also how they broke up each time she used it as an individual count. If it had just been banks that she was defrauding, I would be like, oh, okay. But no, there was actual victims who you took money out of their accounts, deposited the check, took the money. Like, these crimes are not faceless. There are actual people who you stole money from. So again, when I was looking into this even more, I'm like, no, what you're saying in this interview is not making sense. And then the tax fraud, she talks about that too, about claiming her niece and nephew. This is another part where I feel like it's important to understand Black culture. Because a lot of people, especially when people have multiple children, or like she says in the interview, her cousin said that she always owes, she never gets money back. They'll say, hey, claim such and such on your taxes and then give me some of the money. We'll split the money. Because I believe you only can claim up to maybe 3 kids, and then after that, you don't get additional money. So if you have 4 or 5 kids, the parents will claim 3, and then they'll give, the other ones to their parent or their cousin or whoever, say, hey, claim them and then give me some of the money. Again, not saying that is right, but in Black culture, we know that happens. So when she's explaining that count, that one I'm kind of like, okay, that one I can understand, because that's something that Black people do that you may not know that you can't do, especially if you're actually actively helping with them. You might not know. So let's hear her words with that as well.
The last part of my indictment is me claiming my little cousins on my taxes. That's why they said that I lied to the IRS, because I was helping my cousin take care of her children at the time. They were living around the corner from me, and I was helping with it. And she was like, hey, can you claim, your cousin on your taxes this year? You can whatever, pay me for it or whatever. She's like, because I owe every year. I'm always going to owe. And I don't know. I come from St. Louis. I come from the hood, if that makes sense to say. And we never knew that was something you go to jail for, because you claim your cousin.
That's just stuff people do. So her saying that I never knew if that's something you could go to jail for, that one I am more inclined to believe. because like I said, in the Black culture, Black community, that is common. So let's get into these last two, which I find to be wild. Not that they're worse than the other ones, just because of what happens surrounding them. So I told y'all she got called back to come on to season 10 of Basketball Wives LA. At this point, she was no longer with Lorenzo. They were co-parenting, or they were trying to co-parent, but it was a lot of drama going back and forth on Instagram. He had allegedly published some photos of her that he should not have. She responded with some very colorful language, not saying she shouldn't have, I understand. On Instagram, there was bad blood there. So when Basketball Wives called, she had to then move to LA. And at this point, she had reconciled with her mother. We don't know exactly when or how, but she had reconciled with her mother. And so her mother was there helping with her daughter. So because she's living in LA, she has to then pay, but Basketball Wives is paying her very well. Well, at this point, we are around pandemic time. So she took advantage of the COVID-19 relief programs by submitting fraudulent loan applications, as so many people did. She admitted to filing 9 applications for economic injury disaster loans for businesses she claimed to own, which we know she owned 2, but I don't even think she was running them at the time. In these applications, she lied about her business's income, payroll, and even denied having any recent criminal charges. This was after she had been indicted. She was approved for at least 2 of the loans, totaling $144,400, which she then used to fund her personal lifestyle rather than any legitimate businesses. Similarly, she obtained 4 PPP loans, totaling $52,647 under false pretenses, again, abusing programs meant to help struggling businesses during the pandemic. Then, y'all, insurance and rent relief fund. She then submitted fake medical bills to an insurance company, resulting in about $139,479 being paid out to her and co-conspirators for non-existent medical expenses. She also double-dipped into pandemic rent relief, which is crazy because, again, she's being paid from Basketball Wives and a radio job. So with that, in January 2022, after being indicted, she applied to the California COVID-19 rent relief program, falsely claiming to be a California resident with income under $50,000, which Basketball Wives was paying her well over that. Her radio job, I think, was paying her $90,000. So she said she was making under $50,000 and she couldn't pay her rent due to pandemic-related work reductions. In reality, she lived in Los Angeles only, so she was still a resident of St. Louis, while filming the show, and her rent was being covered by the TV network. Nonetheless, she secured $27,801 in rent relief funds with that lie. On top of that, she stopped paying her Los Angeles rent in mid-2021, pocketing the relief money even though her $3,800 month rent was largely being paid for by VH1. So she's making the money and then just not paying rent. Like, sis, how are you? Housing is just something that you don't play with. I don't play about my shelter. I don't play about my car. Like, I don't understand. It's just crazy. And even more so because that radio job, which I think she was making $90,000, they knew she was indicted at this point, and they were still paying her. This is a radio station in St. Louis. So you're making your money from VH1. They're essentially paying for your rent that you're not paying. You're making $90,000 from your radio job, but you're saying that you make less than $50,000 and can't pay your rent, and then just didn't pay it. You got the money from the relief program and then just didn't pay it. Once I started looking into this and seeing what she was doing, I was like, oh, okay, girl. Okay. All the sympathy I had for her when I initially started researching this just went all the way out the window, just all the way. The only one that I say that I can understand all the way through is the tax fraud, because I understand that, and maybe that she didn't know that CPNs were illegal. The depositing fake checks from victims and stuff, you knew that was wrong. This pandemic stuff and the rent stuff, you knew that was wrong. Like, girl. So when she's on that clip with of Basketball Wives crying, talking about she don't wish jail on her enemy, and how the officer had dad or something on his bracelet, and so she knew at that point that her dad was with her or something, and just boohoo bawling, girl, that was just, and she's really, really crying. Like, I don't put it past her that being in jail sucked. It was probably scary. I can understand all of that. However, you committed a crime. Like, you legit committed a real crime. So, okay, hold on. 1 second.
You never understand what it's like until you hear clink, clink. Those, like, you can't get out.
No, I don't think I...
The ride from, like, where I was to the federal building was, like, maybe, like, 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm, like, just sitting back there just, like, looking out the window, like, this is really my life today. Like, this is crazy. It was a very scary experience. It was something that I probably thought I never would have to deal with. And I'm like, this is real. Brandy, and for all of you guys, I want you guys to really understand this experience I had in this moment. How people that you love and your dad passing and my dad passing, like, they will come to you at the craziest times. I was sitting in the car, and my dad had a car just like it before he died. And I was just sitting there thinking, and I was just looking out the window, just like, damn, my dad used to have his car. I felt something holding on to me so tight. And I hadn't felt my dad's presence like that since he had died. I promise you guys. The officer that was sitting to the left of me, because I was sitting in the back in the passenger side, I looked over at him and he moved his wrist. He had a bracelet on that said Daddy on it. It was like him confirming that he was there. You know, at that moment I was like, all right, my daddy telling me it's gonna be all right.
I don't understand how, and the comments is cooking her with that, because you're charged with fraud, but somehow you're using your dad being dead and your castmate's dad being dead to draw sympathy to you, to really make you seem like you're the victim when you weren't at all. And I think that's what a lot of people's issue was with her, is that every time she talked about it, every time she had a chance to take accountability, she never did at all. She always presented herself as a victim. And I think people would have had much more respect if she had said, yeah, I never imagined myself going to jail, but, you know, myself caught up with me and I just gotta, you know what I'm saying? Like, she never did that. And it's gonna show even more her lack of accountability when she goes to court. So her schemes in total amounted to over $560,000 in actual and intended losses to various victims, including banks, credit card companies, the IRS, insurance firms, and government programs. She essentially portrayed herself as a successful influencer and businesswoman publicly, while privately engaging in fraud that Special Agent in charge, Jay Greenberg of the FBI, described as typical of, quote, a fraudster behind the facade of celebrity. So here is the plea deal and guilty conviction. Facing the mountain of evidence, Brittish Williams eventually changed her plea to guilty as part of a deal. In May 2023, the 33-year-old reality star pleaded guilty to 15 felony counts. As part of the plea agreement, prosecutors agreed to dismiss 3 of the original 18 charges, specifically the aggravated identity theft counts, in exchange for her admitting guilt on the other counts. The final charges she pled to were 5 counts of misuse of a social security number, 4 counts of bank fraud, 3 counts of making false statements to the IRS, and 3 counts of wire fraud. In her plea, she formally admitted to all of the fraudulent conduct outlined above, from the tax evasion and credit scams to the pandemic loan fraud and false insurance claims. So after the plea deal, a sentencing hearing was set for fall of 2023. In the interim, a persistence investigation report was compiled, and it painted a grim picture. The probation office calculated that under federal sentencing guidelines, her offenses merited roughly 63 to 78 months in prison, which is 5 to 6.5 years, given the large scope of the fraud. Her defense attorney, however, argued for a much lighter punishment. He suggested an 18-month sentence, claiming that her status as a public figure had already brought unique scrutiny and consequences. Which she did that to herself because, like I said, you was already scamming from your clothing and hair businesses, and you put yourself on TV so that all those victims can come back and say, hey, you still owe me money. Like, she did that. Which I believe she owed money in those cases as well. I had that when I initially researched. I forgot to pull that back up. But I'm pretty sure with those boutique claims, because she was sued for that as well, I believe she had faced indictments for that too. But her sentencing took place on October 24, 2023. U.S. District Judge Henry E. Autry ultimately struck a middle ground between the recommendations. He sentenced her to 48 months or 4 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. He also ordered her to pay $564,069 in restitution to her victims. In court, Judge Autry admonished Williams for her choices, telling her, quote, "You knew what you were doing, you knew it was wrong, and you did it anyway," end quote. The judge emphasized that as a reality TV personality, she had an obligation to set an example, not victimize others. Quote, "Not only are you out there for people to watch your entertainment, but also for people to watch you. That's a big obligation," end quote, he noted. Her attorney, Bo Brindley, protested that the sentence was harsher than what a non-celebrity might have received. He says, quote, "Brittish Williams was punished today, not for fraud, but for her celebrity," end quote, contending that the court treated her more severely due to her public profile. He announced plans to appeal the sentence, asserting Ms. Williams' success is not a crime. "We will challenge this sentence through every legal means available," end quote. It turns out, though, that she did file an appeal, arguing procedural errors and claiming the judge improperly weighed her fame. However, in December 2024, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the 4-year sentence, finding no abuse of discretion. So although she was sentenced in late 2023, Williams did not immediately head to prison that October. The court allowed her to self-surrender a few months later, giving her time to get her affairs in order. She was in court saying, I want to spend Christmas with my daughter. I want to be there for my daughter, all this type of stuff. So the judge was like, okay, I'll let you spend the holidays with your daughter. You have to turn yourself in at the top of the year. I think it was like January 20th or something like that. She's supposed to turn herself in. However, she didn't turn herself in. So in February 2024, Brittish Williams was remanded into federal custody to begin serving her 48-month term. So you were given extra time to spend with your daughter on the condition that you self-surrender a few months later. You didn't do that, so they had to come and arrest you. That's wild. Then, I forgot to mention too, while she was out on probation in between, I think this is around the time where she did her interview with Carlos, she went out of town and her probation officer called and said, "Hey, did you go out of town?" And she's like, "Yes." And he was like, "That's the issue because you didn't ask for permission." Her lawyer told her to just play by the rules. She again showed that she couldn't play by the rules. So she ended up having to go on an ankle monitor. It's just shown time and time again, you don't know how to follow the rules. you think you're above the rules. I don't think this has anything to do with her being a celebrity. I think even if she wasn't a celebrity, she still would not have followed the rules. She still would have scammed because that's just who she's shown herself to be. So the judges didn't have any sympathy for her. So she was incarcerated at a federal prison facility to serve time for her fraud convictions. So federal inmates are typically required to serve at least 85% of their sentence, but there are mechanisms that can shorten time behind bars, such as good behavior credits and early release to halfway houses or home confinement near the end of the sentence. In her case, she did not end up serving anywhere close to 4 full years. In fact, she was released from prison in late summer 2025. On August 12, 2025, roughly 18 months of incarceration, Brittish Williams walked free. You got sentenced to 4 years, but only served 18 months. I think that is wild. Like, that's absolutely wild. I don't know how, because that's initially what her lawyer was trying to get her, 18 months. So the fact that she ended up doing that on federal charges, wild to me. It appears Williams benefited from standard good conduct reductions and perhaps the First Step Act incentives, which can trim sentences for nonviolent offenders who complete certain rehabilitation programs. So by August 2025, news broke that the former reality star was out of prison and officially a free woman, albeit under supervision. In total, she served about 1.5 years behind bars, a fact that many observers noted with surprise given the 4-year sentence. Upon release, she entered into the 5-year supervised release period mandated by her sentence. Supervised release, similar to probation, comes with strict conditions. She must check in regularly with a federal probation officer. She cannot commit any new crimes, financial or otherwise, and likely must obtain approval for any travel or employment changes. This is where we're going to see if she learned anything, because she couldn't follow the rules before when she was out on probation. I hope she stays out of trouble, but this is really where we're going to see if she's truly changed. She is also obligated to continue paying restitution. The court ordered $564,069 due, and Williams will be making payments monthly or as directed by the probation officer to repay the government and victims of for the foreseeable future. Any violation of her supervision terms could potentially land her back in court. So her stakes are really high. I really hope that for her and her daughter's sake, she really hunkers down and do things the right way. After regaining her freedom in August 2025, Brittish largely kept a low profile in terms of public statements. One of her first priorities was personal, of course, as it should have been. She reunited with her young daughter and family. We see heartwarming footage of Brittish meeting her 7-year-old at the moment of release, because her ex-fiance Lorenzo had shared it on Instagram of their daughter running toward her with a bouquet of roses the day she came home, which is sweet. So apparently he had actively supported Brittish during her incarceration, which is notable because when she initially got indicted, he had said that he was going to go for full custody, which was a huge strain in their relationship. So the fact that he supported her, I hope, says a lot to their co-parenting relationship. And he celebrated her homecoming by arranging a first-class flight home, 20 dozen roses, and a private chef, and a whole bunch of things to say welcome home, which is sweet. But online, social media reaction to her release was a mixture of support, relief, and some snark. Fans and followers flooded the Shade Room's comment section and other forums with their thoughts. So a number of people expressed happiness that she was out and reunited with her little girl, writing messages like, glad she's home and back with her baby, and welcome home, Brittish. Others remarked on how quickly her prison stint seemed to pass. Wow, time flies, somebody said. And, there are indeed a lot of people stunned that a 4-year sentence was eventually resulted in a 1.5 years. Somebody said, since when is Fed time half? Which, seriously, yeah. Somebody else said she was in there for, 2 years? Wow. So people are like, and I'm so shocked that she did half for Fed time. That's just crazy. But there's like memes and everywhere around talking about not bad, sign me up. To be honest, she ate the system up. Like, people just making jokes and all that type of stuff. But since coming home, she's been cautiously rebuilding her public image. She scrubbed her Instagram account, deleting old posts, and then shared a few new photos, essentially starting fresh on social media. One of her first posts showed her back in full mommy mode, posting with Dash and cherishing their reunion. In terms of public statements, British has not done a full media tour post-release, but she previously gave insight into her actions in an interview around the time of her conviction. So, now that she is out, it remains to be seen what British will do next. As of early 2026, she has not announced any new business ventures or return to television, but she has expressed a desire to move forward positively. In her social media interactions, she has hinted that she is focusing on family and personal growth. She also clarified her relationship status post-release, noting that she is, quote, very single and co-parenting, seemingly putting romantic pursuits on the back burner for now. Her priority is clearly her daughter and establishing a stable life after prison. I think I'm glad I waited to cover her until now, especially to see how much time she actually ended up serving. So it all worked out. Just making sure I got everything. I believe I did. Oh, Sip or Spill, right. Okay. So in her interview with Carlos King, British said she did not know the CPN was illegal at the time and that she thought it was a way to build credit. She also says she was dealing with addiction, grief, and financial pressure. So here is the question. When someone says they did not understand the consequences, how much does that change the way you view the crime? Does context change accountability, or does it only explain how they got there? Sip if you believe the context matters and people can come back from this, or spill if you feel like a financial crime is still a choice no matter what the backstory is. So, as we get out of here, Brittish Williams' case is a reminder that fraud does not always start with a mastermind. Sometimes it starts with panic, pressure, bad advice, shortcuts, or just choosing to fraud. And I say this carefully. In her interview with Carlos, British describes her fraud behavior as tied to addiction and survival mode. She talks about losing her father, struggling financially, and feeling like she had to figure something out. She always talks about how common it felt in her environment to do things people do not always realize can be federal charges. But here's the line we cannot blur. Even if a shortcut is common, it can still be a crime. Even if you did not understand the law, it can still cost you everything. And even if the internet calls it a hack, which TikTok has taught us, the federal system calls it fraud. British served time, she's been released, she's back with her daughter, and now she has to live with the consequences, including restitution, supervision, and a public story that will now follow her. So yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow the show. Please leave a rating, 5-star rating, and review me on Apple and Spotify. Please leave comments. I read and respond to all of them. It also helps other people find the show. I very much appreciate that. If you want to join the Facebook group, you can do that. If you want to support me more directly on Patreon, you can do that as well. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the places. Yeah, so until next time, keep your coffee iced, your crochet steady, and your choices legal. Bye!
Disclaimer. Great effort is made to ensure that all materials used in Black Coffee Crime and Crochet adhere to fair use guidelines. No copyright infringement is intended. If you are the copyright owner or represent the owner of any material used in this content and have concerns about its use, please contact me and I will promptly address the issue.